started reading the journals of Mahabharat in ISRO related to the Saraswati river, and that has increased my interest, and then I have done some studies related to that. So that is my introduction, and apart from that, I have a website called Ancient Voice, which is the world's largest and the first wiki portal for Veda Itihasa Puranas. And I also now currently working on creating a platform called Dharma Digital, which is focused on creating dharmic tools and platforms. So this character of Krishna is actually a product of Dharma Digital. So now what we are going to do here. So primarily there are different kinds of studies that is going on into Mahabharata, and chronology is one of them. And there are so many other topics. I'll have a brief note on all of them. And then we will focus on the chronology part, which is like leading to the Kurukshetra war dates. And then I also look at the range of the Kurukshetra war dates that has come up in the last few centuries from many researchers. And I am introducing the concept of habitable zones of Kurukshetra war dates. And these habitable zones are actually created based on the comfort zones for each of the Kurukshetra war dates. Like it will be based on genealogy, like the Puranic king list, in which the genealogy from Yudhishthira to Kshemaka is mentioned. It will be based on technology evolution, like horse domestication, chariots, wheels, etc. Dwaraka excavations and bathymetry studies. Then Saraswati driving up climatology. So they each of these topics, and even IE linguistics. So they introduce their own chronological lines in the time axis. So there are certain time limits for each of these. So we will explore all of this. And lastly, I'm actually looking at the chronology revision proposed by Vedavirya and the impact that will cause in the genealogy. So that is a nutshell of my topic. Now, coming to the first part, there is a different diversification of different subjects. So one is the Mahabharata chronology that I have explained, in which Nilesh, Vedavir, and so many other researchers like Bhatnagar and others are there. And you have the Mahabharata geography, where primarily I'm working in that area. And archaeology, basically there is B.B. Lal, K.N. Dikshit, and such giants. In Mahabharata literature, which is a very old topic, you have Bhattacharya, Indrajit, Vishwadluri, all these people, Bhairappa, everybody. And translations, you have Mendat, Kishari Mohan Ganguly, Vivek Dabroy. And then manuscripts, you have Suttangar, who was created the critical edition. And the Rigvedic chronology is there, similar to Mahabharata. So like Shrikant Talagari, everybody is working in that area. Then Puranic geography, where K.S. Waldia and others. And of course, there is the popularization, because this research area, most of the people are not very familiar because this is not accessible to many of the people. So you have this popularization of some of this research to Mahabharata, Ramayana novelists like Amish Tripathi, and then of course there is going on the Mahabharata and Ramayana TV serials. So all these names are very familiar and very popular with common people. B.R. Chopra and Raman Sagar, and even the actors like Arun Goyal, who acted as Rama. So this is the overall the domain, and then here we are actually focusing on the chronology. So primarily, I have to give a summary of the chronology analysis steps. So first is the literature analysis that people will be doing. And then interpretation of the analysis, literature analysis, then archaeology, and finally interdisciplinary corroboration. So in the literary analysis, what is primarily is that you take all the slogas related to the chronology. So it will be related to Graha Nakshatras, comets, months, seasons, etc., eclipse. Just one example is this Shvedagrahas Tata Chitram Samidikramya Tishtati. That is the Shvedagraha is coming and interfering with the Chitra Nakshatra. So that is just one of the verse in Mahabharata. And then you can interpret it in many different ways. So there is a Shvedagraha, people have interpreted as Mercury, as a comet. Some people have interpreted it as Neptune. So that is the interpretation variation. Then you have to corroborate the data with the ancient sky maps produced by planetarium software, Hora and Panchanga software, etc. So some of the exercises like finding the years of Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, finding the years and dates with the 3 consecutive eclipses, or a combinations of that. So this is what astronomy analysis is about. So basically you have analysis of the text, getting the astronomical information, and interpret that information as something known to us. And then based on the interpretation, go into the planetarium software, look at the computer generated ancient skies, and then corroborate it. And the last is the interdisciplinary corroboration. So corroborate archaeoastronomy results with other disciplines like genealogy, archaeology, climatology, bathymetry, linguistics, technology, evolution, etc. So this is an entire process that every researcher that I have shown in the previous slide, they will be doing the same thing. And here actually that this is the basic, this is the most important slide. Why is there are so many dates and why every researcher stick to the particular date? So you will see that this is the reason. See, in literature analysis, there is a possibility of taking partial sets of verses. So assume that there are 120 verses which are focusing on astronomy in Mahabharata. Mahabharata have total 1 lakh verses, but out of which the verses which are focusing on this chronological information, that is like a subset of it. And in that subset, there are confusing verses, there are conflicting verses, that some verses in which it says the Shani is in one place, but in another place Shani will be in another in a different place. So there are conflicting verses and then irrelevant verses also. Like some verses which cannot be dated or which is not relevant, but the researcher thinks that it is relevant, but another researcher thinks it is not relevant. So all these things is a variable everywhere. Like each researcher have a different interpretation on what is confusing, what is conflicting, what is irrelevant. And then there is, because of this reason, there is a partial set of verse each researcher is looking at. And interpretation, just in the right hand side itself, you know, the Shvedagraha, the interpretation can be anything. Of course, valid thing which is not a random, but based on some assumptions, the interpretations keep on varying. So this is another reason. And people go with different methodologies like Vedanga Jyotisha based analysis, Surya Siddhanta analysis, modern astronomy analysis. Like for example, Neptune. So Neptune is not mentioned in anywhere. So when you have one particular reference in Mahabharata, one graha, it is identified as Neptune. Definitely it is not. It is something which is basing on the modern astronomy models. And then you have divergent computation models. Because of that, also variation happen. Divergent tools. So just example, there is a Trik Siddhanta, Surya Siddhanta based Panchanga, and then in the data analysis itself, like how they compute the planetary position, there is the variation in the delta value because of selection of different like models like Swiss Epimers, NASA JPL. All these things are varied. Then tools are varying. SkyMap, all these things have different variation. So different archaeoastronomers who are giving the dates of Mahabharata use all of this different. And the last one, there is a partial corroboration possibility. Like for example, you corroborate the astronomy date, the arrived date with some part of it, like genealogy, but you ignore archaeology or climatology or bathymetry, linguistics, technology, evolution. So this is why there are so many number of dates. And second is the cyclicity of the celestial events. So there is, for example, every celestial event like eclipse, etc., there is a cyclicity. So nakshatras are anyway, they are fixed on the fixed markers in the sky. And against the backdrop of nakshatras, the moon is moving. And mostly moon always moves, like have a monthly motion and moon. Then there is sun, annular motion over nakshatras. Then eclipses with 3 consecutive eclipses. These are very frequent. And planet Mercury and Venus, they move fast, so they will their positions keep on repeating. Mars and Jupiter, so there are 12 years. There is period of Jupiter and Saturn around 30 years. I'm not giving exact, but I'm just showing their cyclicity. And there is Jupiter-Saturn conjunction period. It occurs once in 20 years. Comets, the Halley comets comes once in 76 years. And approximate combinations described in Mahabharata in so many multiple number of verses. It almost repeat in almost every millennium, or at least once in 2 millennium. Then the last one, which is very slow, is the precision of equinox, which is anyway the best bet, but it has its own challenges to locate. There is 1 degree years, and there are a total of 25,920 years of evolution. So all these things are factored in, but there are a lot of except the ninth one. Everything is cyclic, and it can repeat in a period from 1000 BC to 5000 BC. That is a problem. There is another cyclicity is another problem. So as a result of it, you have a lot of clustering of Mahabharata date by different researchers. So you can have divided time axis from up to 1000 BC, 2000 BC, 3000 BC, 4000, 5000, and 6000 BC. And here are the dates. So you can see the Vartak and Nilesh of date 5561 BC in that sector. And you have a cluster of dates, largest number of cluster of dates, very close to 3100 BC. So the prominent among that, Vedavir area 31362, then ML Raja 3143, then Kota Venkatachalam and his son 3139 BC, traditional date 3138, then Jayasri is there. Then there is Sadananda, Achar and Manish Pandit 3067. And you have, there is one date, Balakrishna's, it's 2559 BC. And you have another cluster of dates between 1000 BC and 2000 BC. You have Mohan Gupta giving the Mahabharata date at 1952 BC. Ashok Bhatnagar at 1793. Ramurthy at 1504. R.N. Iyengar 1478. P.R. Sarkar is there 1298, and Director Coach 1198. And finally, Professor, they have dates at 836 and 950. So this is the result. So you have so many number of researchers. This is not an exhaustive list. So if any of the researcher names are not mentioned here, that is because I don't have any email interaction, or there is a lack of familiarity from my side understanding their researches. But it's basically what I'm saying is this is the kind of number of dates and how these are clustered. The clustering mainly because most of the Mahabharata observations can be seen as repeating, or there is a kind of conformance, a partial conformance, of course, in various epochs, like because of the cyclic nature of the astronomical events, and also because they have multiple, as I mentioned in the previous slide, because of the variation in the literature analysis, then how they interpret that, and in the usage of software and the different models. All this, because of all these reasons, this diversification has occurred. So that is because of this reason, and since we are comparing this large number of Mahabharata dates from of a large number of researchers, our objective is not going deep into each of these individual researches, but what we are going to do is comparing it with the other chronologies which are emerging from the technology evolution, etc. So that is where the habitable zone concept comes in. So the first one that you are seeing is the habitable zone of genealogy. So it is a very complex part because information of genealogy comes from various sources like Puranas and some of the historical Raja lineages. So because of that, you have this. So I will explain in detail. So I'm just, this is a summary slide of all the different habitable zone. And this green one, which just come right now, it is the habitable zone defined by the technologies like spooked wheat chariot, domestication of horses, etc. And you have a lot of studies happened in the Dwaraka city state, in the Dwaraka region. And so many dates are coming out of it. So it is not a monolithic date like many people believe. Like for example, the exact city state itself is dated at 1500 BC. You might have heard the recent talk of Nalini Rao, hosted by Sangam, Sampan talks. So she will be telling you that the city state will be dated at 1500 BC. And there is a pottery in Dwaraka, which is much more older, like it is 3532 BC. Then there are two submergence events, which is emerging from the bathymetric studies. One is at 1500 BC and the another is at 3700 BC. And then you have Saraswati tribe studies, like of course, depending upon the definition of what constitutes the tribe, there is variations in that. But more or less 1900 BC is considered as a kind of a tribe that occurred into the river Saraswati. That is observable through the Balarama's pilgrimage. Like it was flowing in Haryana, but suddenly it dries up just in the Haryana Rajasthan border, and then it reappears very close to the joining the sea. It reappears, and it is close to the Dwaraka. So this is what Balarama has seen. So that kind of dryer, in which the central part of the river is dried, that is more or less corroborated in the 1900 BC. But of course, this is being a very approximate subject, there can be a lot of variations in that. So this particular, it's actually a range. Similarly, tectonic shifts happening at 2500 BC. So this is the kind of habitable zones established by different disciplines. And then there is a last one is the origin of Sanskritam, but it's a very controversial thing. So many people consider it evolves very slowly, so it can be older also. But a lot of linguistic consensus based on a lot of formulas, everything, and the non-evolution of Sanskritam based on what you can read through the Rig Veda and then in the Mahabharata and Ramayana and the Kalidasa Sanskritam. So the kind of evolution, the rate of evolution you can actually observe directly from these non-texts. So you can interpolate what will be in the past. And like that, linguistic evolution theories have given some kind of approximate date of 4000 BC for the Sanskritam as we know it, because the language is a continuum. So there is no point in which you can say this is not Sanskritam and this is something else. So subject to that, there is a reasonably agreed consensus somewhere around 4000 BC, can be 5000 BC also. So that kind of a consensus for the Sanskrit. Now I'm just going into detail of the genealogy. So this is the information that you get from the Puranas. So this is almost like an approximation of all the king list, which we get from multiple Puranas, Vishnu Purana, Vayu Purana, and many other Puranas. So out of this is what you are getting, more or less table is of 30 generations. So Yudhishthira, Abhimanyu, Parikshit, Janameja, Shataniga, Ashwamedha, Datta. They are mentioned in Mahabharata itself. And then in the Puranas, so many other kings are mentioned up to Shemaka, who is generation 30. So this is one very important information in dating Kurukshetra. So what is happening is we assay, this is our own assumption, generation gap of 25 to 35 years. That means between two generations, like a king gets another son born to him when he is 25 years of age or 35 years of age. This is what happens even now also, like people get children from 25 to 35 years of age. But there are exceptions, like some people will be 45 or 60, but some others will be having 20, at the age of 20 also. So on an average, 25 to 35 is a good number. And another is the sheet anchor that is now derived from the established chronology, that is 350 BC to 450 BC. But definitely there are changes to this particular sheet anchor date. I will tell about that when I discuss about Vedaveer Arya's chronology revision. So, but this is what 90% of the chronology researchers have accepted right now, which include Western scholars and even scholars from our side who argue for the out of India theory. So they are against Aryan invasion theory, but they are actually for this particular chronology dates, they go with dates like this for Mahapadmananda. So with that assumption, this is what you get for the Yudhishthira's period. So this is the calculation. And there is one more assumption is one more caution is that the names of the king vary. All the kings mentioned in the king list vary in the different Puranas, and the number of generation also sometimes vary. Like sometimes they introduce some other kings in between. So it is varying from 30 to 40 generations. So that 40 is the maximum number that is seen, and 30 is the minimum. Most of the people agree on 30, but just for the sake of comfort or the possibility of missing kings, etc., we consider it as 40. And beyond that, stretching is not a correct practice. So then, based on these two variables, like generation gap of 25 to 35 years, and the kings from 30 to 40, even though 30 is what you get from most of the Puranas. So then you give a two, then you can actually multiply that, use the 350 as the sheet anchor or 450 as the sheet anchor. Add the duration. So minimum gap is 30 into 25, 750 years between Yudhishthira and Shamaka. Maximum gap is 40 into 35, that is 1,400 years. So this give a range. So that means Yudhishthira should be riding between 1100 BC to 1850 BC. That is the range we get. That is what you have seen in the previous slide. This is one slide. One of the habitable zone in that large in the slide of all the consolidated habitable zone. This is just one of them. So I'm just showing it in detail because this is how other dates, other ranges also arrived at. All other dates are arrived. So in this particular this habitable zone, because it's like lower limit 1100 BC. Then 1850 BC at the upper limit. You have this many number of researchers dates coming into this range. Mohan Gupta, Ashok Bhatnagar, Ramamurthy, Iyengar, Sarkar, Datarkoj. So from 1952 BC to 1198 BC. So now you have another information, and this is actually dated at 1872 Satyartha Prakash Granth. This is different from the Puranas, and this is actually royal dynasty list. In that, Yudhishthira Shamaka gap is mentioned as little different from the Puranas, like 1770 years. 1770 years. And it gives an exact number like 1770 years, 11 months, 10 days. And 30 kings are mentioned. That is a problem. Because then it leads to an average and generation gap of 59 years, which is like little bit on the stretch, because 35 is we consider as a maximum possible average, but here it is 59 is coming, and there is a hypothesis you have to introduce to support this, like missing generations are there, like that you have to tell. So that is like somewhat little more weaker. That's what I say. Similarly, you have this Parikshit to Mahapadma Nanda. There is another. So this is a direct information given in the Puranas. Like, you don't have to count the number of kings and multiply it with average, etc. Directly it is given. Parikshit to Mahapadma Nanda is 1015 years. And if you calculate, reverse calculate, it will come to around 40 to 29 generation, like based on 25 to 35 years gap. And it is a healthy one, because we have considered like 30 to 40 generation can be there, but it is giving you 40 to 29 generations, because there are 1015 years between Parikshit and Mahapadmananda directly mentioned in the Vishnu Purana. So then it comes to Parikshit at 1365 to 1465 BC, and then automatically you can calculate Yudhishthira at 1415 to 1535. So two dates, Ramamurthy and Iyengar comes into this range, 1504 and 1478. then there are variation. The Vishnu Purana is much little more very strong Purana, but there is the Vayu Purana and Matsya Purana. As you've seen, there are 3 versions of Vayu Purana and 5 versions of Matsya Purana. That itself reduces its value in terms of in comparison to Vishnu Purana, because there are multiple versions. So in there is Parishit, just slight change in the number. Instead of this is 1050 instead of 1015, and it comes to 42 to 30 generation, not a bad thing. Similarly, from there you can arrive at the date of Yudhishthira, and it comes to this range. So the same two people's dates are coming in that range. And finally, there is just one version of Matsya Purana, where the date is saying at 1500 years. Parishit to Mahabharata. So 3 sources about the difference between Parishit to Mahabharata, quoted by 3 different sources. One is Vishnu Purana, another is different versions of Vayu and Matsya, and just one version of Matsya, there is a slightly different number. And this is another, you can see there is a 60 to 42 generation. So 60 is on a higher side, while our ideal is 25 to 35 years, but this will go into 60 generation, 60 to 42 generations. Means that many number of additional things you need to consider. This is the kind of problems for this particular information. So similarly, you will get if you compute in our formula, you get a date for Yudhishthira at 1920 to 2020 BC, and 2 dates, Mohan Gupta and Ashok Putnar, come very close to this date. So now, if you make a summary, so this is what you get. So the dates in the 2K and 1K, that is the short form of the dates ranging between 1000 BC to 2000 BC. These are all become green, or they all fall into the habitable zone of this genealogy. And then you have the chariot evolution. So this all establish its own genealogies. That's what I am coming. Its own habitable zones. So chariot evolution, these are the information that we have. The free roaming horses, that is wild horses, in fact, you can see it from 30,000 BC onwards. So there are a lot of cave arts, Bhimbetka cave and so many other places. You see horses. So the horses are, and you can look at the closely, they are like wild horses, which the artists see, and then they will paint it on the cave. So such pictures are there from 30,000 BC onwards. So there is no boundary. That is not. So all the dates of Mahabharata is anyway younger than 30,000 BC. There is nothing. Domestication of horses, 4,000 to 3,500 BC. So the criteria is like you have to get a horse burial in some human settlement. So that means that horse is living along with the human beings. So that we got from 4,000 to 3,000 BC in various different places in the world. And then invention of potter's wheels and the solid wooden wheel with a middle hole. That is the potter's original wheel, to create pots from clay. So this is coming from 3,500 BC onwards we are getting. Excavated specimens are there. Then wheeled carts, bullock carts. So you get from 3,500 BC onward. There are solid wheel carts actually, driven by bullock carts and other animals like goat, sheep, even dogs. Those things are there. And then solid wheel battle chariot driven by wild ass. The oldest record we have is from Sumeria, 2600 BC onwards. That means it can be there in India also. That's what I'm saying. That is asses are the domesticated earlier because they are a little more smaller in size. Human beings can actually control them. And then the horses, the horse-driven lightweight chariot, we get from 2000 BC onwards. The reason being that the horse is very difficult to domesticate, and to make it drive a horse, to make the horse drive a chariot, little more skill is required. So you have to derive entire manuals. The Ashwa, there are like a lot of treatises on how to tame the horse and make it ride a chariot. So it is actually a big technology evolution that has happened. Like chariot are created. So first they have carts, driven by a bull. Bull is like moving slowly. So the bull, when the bullock carts can have a certain speed, the bull will not run away. It will move very slowly, and you can have a solid wheel for the bullock cart. Even if it moves, uh, it will not break away. So this is the problem. So it's a very big technology challenge, and it takes a lot of time. That is why it takes this much amount of time, and you get it only at 2000 BC. So far, I mean, I'm saying all what is the current. Everything can change when like just one excavation and then entire date will change. Where if you find something like instead of 2000 BC, if you find it 3000 BC, the problem solved. Then date will just go from 2000 BC to 3000 BC. But currently, what is known, that is what I'm saying. So you have all these things like 30,000. So many people ask this, like you have 30,000 BC, the horse is painted in Paleolithic cave art. So what is the big deal? You can have chariots driven by horses. No, that is the problem is that there is a very well-known technology evolution. Like your mobile phone. Earlier in 2000 CE, 20 years back, you have a Nokia phone where there is no color, nothing, no visual, no graphics, nothing. Only the charger is there, and then the signal strength. You have another two indications. But now you have a mobile phone where you have much more high resolution than a computer, a laptop. So that technology has to have evolved by its own effort. So because of the same reason, that's what I'm saying, like 3500 BC, the potter's wheel, and then wheel carts at 3500 BC. So then solid with the chariot driven by asses, because asses are a little more easy to tame. And finally, 2000 BC, the war horses. So this particular understanding we should have. So because of that, you have got another set of habitable zone. And similarly, I'm saying the Dwarka excavation, and we had a talk just a few days back. So you can, these are the dates, like the pottery is date. There is the oldest thing dated as known now, pottery is 3528 BC. So all that 3K dates will fall in this range. Then you have seals and inscriptions, but they are dated to 1500 BC. The entire city state with a couple of satellite towns dated at 1500 BC, excavated by Dr. S.R. Rao. And then there are two submersion events, like bathymetry, showing you can see in this graph, there are two like hill kind of thing. These are the submersion events. One is at 3000 BC and another is 1500 BC. And in Mahabharata, that entire Dwaraka region, it is mentioned that there was an older island called Kushasthali. It was submerged. After a long period of time, it re-emerged. And during the re-emergent period, Krishna has created the city of Dwaraka. So that is, you can actually corroborate, if you want, that you can corroborate that information. So this excavation, this Dwaraka excavation in bathymetry, you have its own habitable zone is introduced. So in that you have all the 3K dates, like Narayachar, Manish Pandit, and Vedavir Arya. All these dates are coming in. And then if you are a little more stringent, like only I consider the city state and seals and inscription, that then you have to restrict it to 1500 BC. So only dates which are younger than 1000 BC, 500 BC will fall in. Then the Saraswati drying up, it is exactly similar to the situation of the horse domestication, chariot technology evolution. Definitely there was, the same problem, like 47,000 BC and 10,000 BC, you have rivers there. Rivers are very old. All rivers west of Ganga, Yamuna, Satluj, they all flowed westward. And then you have snow-fed Satluj flowing along Saraswati at 13,000 to 6,000 BC. So you have got a river there. Basically, it is Satluj, that is Shadadru. And so Shadadru and Saraswati are the same, you have to consider, at 13,000 BC to 6,000 BC. Then the monsoon rains start feeding Saraswati, and Harappan towns emerged since 6,000 BC. You have got Harappan cities like Virana, like you have 7,000. Virana is the oldest Harappan city, 7,570 BC. Kakhigari is 6,000 to 1900 BC. So Saraswati is hailed as a sea-going great river. All these things there. And then tectonic disturbance around 2500 BC, the monsoon rain reduction started. And then the late Harappan shift eastward concentrate into Haryana. Like it happens around 1900 to 1300 BC. Based on this information. It's also there in the archaeology, like that a lot of new more cities, Harappan towns pops up in the Haryana region. And then the Satluj breaks, the Yamuna and Satluj breaks away. So this is all happens around 1900 BC. You can stretch it. I mean, this is like all these research are actually continuously evolving. So these dates can change. And then, so currently everybody accepted the way it is explained in Mahabharata, like Saraswati dried up to Vinashana and then reappears at Chamasolbeda. That is close to the its merger with sea. That kind of a scenery more or less suitable at 1900 BC. But dry up is a very subjective thing. How much is that dried up is a question. Different scholars have different opinion. So then Harappans, there is a two kind of split, like Dwaraka, Sindhu, Savira in the southwest, Purupanjala, Salvamatsya in the northeast. So that kind of a difference. Even in Mahabharata, it recorded, right? You have Krishna and Dwaraka, and then Pandavas in the Kuru region. Then you have a painted graver site, painted graver, that is the continuation of the Harappan all over the river. But you have by 1000 BC, everything is dried up. So it is adversely affecting many date which is lesser than 1000 BC also. So you can see the date spanning in that Saraswati dry up scenario. And here is the language evolution. So I told about like how the language, how can you give a date for the Vedic Sanskritam? So that is basically based on the study of the existing Sanskritam, like Kalidasa Sanskritam and Ramayana Sanskritam, Mahabharata Sanskritam, Rigveda Sanskritam, slight variations. So based on that slight variation, you can approximately associate how much time it takes for the language to completely unintelligible because of a small change in the usage of nouns. Some nouns go out of fashion, some nouns come new, and the grammatical structure slightly changes, etc. But some other researchers don't agree with these dates. So that is also I need to say. So typically, more or less, there is a kind of a linguistic consensus that as we see now, it's around 4000 BC. The date can be like extended also based on new studies. So, but one thing, most important thing is that this Proto-Indo-European linguistics is not something foreign or completely a Western tool. It is used by Indian researchers like Srikant Talagiri, and it is used successfully to refute the Aryan invasion theory by replacing it with the out of India theory. You should read that using Talagiri's books. And even if other languages models are used, like Subhash Kaka has introduced another model which is not based on IE linguistics. Even there also grammatic structures change typically in thousands of years, in 1000 years, there is something called a language horizon. So you will see the language setting, like the familiar language is no longer there because it's too different than what you know. That happens. So now comes to the most interesting part. So my friend Vedavir Arya has introduced some revisions in the chronology. And of course, he has based his studies on other researchers like Kota Venkatala Jalanji and then Shastriji and so many other people. But now it has got a lot of popularity because of the discussions, extensive discussions that Vedavir is involved in. So because of that, there can be shifts, like especially in the genealogy part that one slide I have introduced. So currently accepted date of Buddha Nirvana is 483 BC. So all this Mahabhatma Nanda at this 350 to 450 BC, all these things are actually depend upon the Buddha Nirvana date. So Vedavir is proposing a change in this Buddha Nirvana that is around 1382 years of push. So Buddha becomes 1865 BC. So this is will change all our equations. And okay, of course, there are a lot of Buddhist traditions which will push it even further also. But I am not. They are not very scholarly in nature because there is no proof given. Just mentioning like it is such a so many years of old. In contrast to the Vedavarya's research. So there is a 1937 years push also. But I consider these two changing of the chronology. You will see all the dates that is mentioned, especially the chronology, they will be shifting. So you can see, I have shown you this slide before. So earlier, this entire genealogy was centered around 1000 BC to 2000 BC. And all the dates of 2K, 1K dates were actually in the habitable zone. But if you accept the chronology version of Vedavir, then all the dates centered around 3000 BC becomes part of the habitable zone. And all of them will be valuable candidate. But you see, large number of dates are there in that area. So definitely there will be discussions and interactions and debates. And then one more important point I need to is that because of the chronology revision, only the genealogy has changed. Genealogy for the habitable zone, but the other things are unchanged and unmoved. So only those things will change only when there are further research into these areas of technology. Like if there is a revision of the Dwaraka excavation or the pottery dating or there is submergence events are more or less only 1500 BC and 3700 BC are well identifiable from the graphs. And there will be, if there is a revisions of Saraswati triumph or tectonic shifts, new insights should come. And anyway, language evolution, I think, pose no problem for any researcher because it's coming from Sanskritam is available as per the linguistic analysis from 4000 BC onwards. So that poses no problem to the researchers because it's well into every date is well into that particular zone. I think except maybe Nilesh and Bhattan. So that is what happens. So now this entire talk, I have decided to do this talk because I see a lot of people asking questions about why there are so many dates, why researchers come and join, sit together and do a conference, etc. So I think I have answered those questions and I have informed why there are so many dates and why the researchers are sticking to those dates. So what I have done is that I have taken it very seriously, and I have been interacting with all the chronology researchers. Some of them well known to me from 4 or 5 years. I am actually having email communications, and some of them I came to know very recently. But I am actually having email discussions, and email groups are created, and there is a need felt for having a grand Mahabharata conference, and where you have Mahabharata chronologists sit together and analyze, and then chronology analysts, like who has knowledge about the chronology, even though they are not dating Mahabharata, but they have some expertise on the chronology. Like for example, Dwaraka excavation, Saraswati triumph, linguistics. So they can be invited, and then there can be audiences like you who are intelligent and enthusiastic, and then other researchers who are not related, because it's a very interesting topic, maybe the most interesting topic in the currently regarding the Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc. So everybody can be invited, and so I have sent this email communication to different and the concept of habitable zone, and then all this information. So this is my final result. I have actually presented to different conference organizers, etc. This is what we are actually having. All the dates I plotted and shown. So this can come place. And then now currently, because of the chronology revision, it will be divided into two groups. So there will be a group of researchers who are in close to the 3100 BC, 3K group. So they can focus on the chronology revision that is now led by Vedavir Arya, and then they can actually focus on the dates which are close to the 3100 BC. And then the other groups, that 1K and 2K group researchers, can have a debate between themselves. And they can actually anchor themselves to the technology evaluation, mathematics studies, Dwarka excavations, climatology, Saraswati drying up, monsoon, etc. So actually, I'm proposing this kind of a conference because this is not something which you can solve, and people should not think that okay, like just by one talk, just by one presentation, this particular problem can be solved. This is a civilizational problem. Solving the Mahabharata date, Kurukshetra war date problem is actually a major milestone it will be in our Bharata Varsha, our dharmic history. So you have to have something like a big session of 5-day session, and then you have to bring in audiences, chronology analysts, Mahabharata chronologists. They can be on a stage, and then they can debate. Round tables you can do. Then 2 sets, you can go divide into 2 sets, 1K, 2K group, and then the 3K group. They debate each other, then come. Whoever is having that confidence, they can come together and then have a final debate. So like that, you can actually have to do it in a very systematic way with considering it to be a 5-day conference like that. So you can organize this kind of a thing. Like, so I am just connections and my own correspondence with the different people like Rahul, who is the organizer. He can also be the person. Then Indica is there, Indus University, iHeart. So any of these people have to come forward and organize this kind of an event. So then you will be able to solve this problem in a very successful manner. And the kind of planning that we need to do is maybe not to try to do in a single year or something like that. Typically, you have to give something like 5 years in different series of conferences, and then you. So that is the end of my presentation talk.
Hello, Diditji. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thanks for a nice presentation. But I want to know what the final conclusions about the timeline and the duration about the Kurukshetra war.
So actually the subject of my talk was that we cannot conclude in a very fast manner, and I have my own preferences, but I am actually not introducing here because I am actually through this talk what I want to tell people is that there are like the different researchers, and there are different reasons for them to stick to their date. So if you ask me, like for example, that's what I mentioned. Like you need to have something like a 5 years timeline. You have multiple conferences and debates and discussions, and then you arrive at the date. Because our tendency is like whenever there is an uncertainty, we want to quickly come to one conclusion, and that is the reason why now you have got people fan groups, like one particular researcher, and then there are a large number of fans to that particular researcher. And then typically because of this human tendency, because people want the result very quickly, they will not look at the other researcher and their work because the mind is locked to the particular researcher and the data of that particular researcher. So that is why I want through this talk, what I want is that people should avoid that kind of sticking or inflexibility, and understand that the problem is very much close to the point of solving, but it requires time. When I say very much close, means 200 years back you cannot do this. 50 years back you don't have this kind of clarity. But now you have got all the dates on the same place. Now, like for example, in this slide, you can look at all the dates are there. And you can also see the date clusters. And I don't know which is the researcher you are following, but irrespective of that, you have to understand that this problem is not solved conclusively, but only different researchers has come to certain conclusion based on their own comfort. And the reason why I have shown why there are a lot of different dates. Here actually I will show you, right, that why there are dates. Yeah, this is the reason. Because there is a variation in the literature analysis. The number of verses each researcher takes varies. The number of verses they reject because considering it as confusing, conflicting, or irrelevant version, that is variable. Interpretation is variable. Then computation model that they are using, it is variable. And there is a comparison, the final corroboration variation. Because of that, this is currently in a state in which not one single date can be considered as conclusively solved. So, for answering your question, this slide is what is we know about the Kurukshetra war right now. If you ask me very quickly to answer, like you can see just randomly, very randomly, I say so many people are at 3000 BC. So maybe that can be the one of the date can be the correct one. But then I have already shown other slides where you have a pull to the left hand side, whereas other younger dates can also be true. So this is our current state and this is a true picture. And it will finally emerge as the final date, but it takes some amount of time and effort. That's my answer.
Okay, thank you very much for this enlightening talk. I think it's one of the most it's one of those talks where you have adopted a very holistic approach, inspecting this whole issue from different aspects, be it archaeology, be it sky mapping and other things like that. So I have a couple of questions. One is that you mentioned that the domestication of horses was somewhere done in 4000 BCE, as well as I can recall from the talk. So going through Ramayana, of course, I've not gone through the Valmiki Ramayana, but going through Tulsidas Ramcharitra Manas, there also even domestication of horses is there, even the chariots, horse-bearing chariots, etc. are mentioned over there. So can you please throw some light on this? And am I allowed to ask the second question right now or after you answer the first one?
We will answer this first because then I'll forget.
Okay, sure.
There is one problem that is like there is a circular problem is there. Like if you say that because horse domestication is mentioned in Ramayana, because of that Ramayana the horse should be old, domestication should be old. That is circular actually. Reasoning is circular because we are trying to date the Ramayana or Mahabharata based on available record of the horse domestication. So it is not the other way around, right? So that is the problem. So you need to look at the horse domestication irrespective of what is mentioned in the text. You have to look at and dig the ground. That is what the archaeology is about. So they different archaeologists in different countries, not only India but in Europe, everywhere, they dig the ground and they see some information. So obviously archaeology is a kind of discipline where things will be challenged. Like for today, the horse domestication is mentioned as, for example, based on the records which are available, it is between 4000 3500 BC. This is the nature of science, and archaeology also is a science. So sometime, maybe in some place, even it can be in India also, you dig a burial site or dig the ground and you get a evidence of horse domestication and it is beyond 4000 or 3500 BC, it may be 10,000 BC, you see very clear evidence of horse domestication, then the date will change. That is the nature of archaeology. So then you actually at that time you can say, okay, this particular date event, which we were saying impossible because the horses domestication is only between 4000 3000 BC, but you are suggesting Mahabharata older than that, and I was objecting that. Now, but I am seeing the date coming from the archaeology, so I can accept it. Now, this is the way science work. So it can be possible. Like for example, these kind of dates of archaeology can be revised. It can be older later at a later stage. But 2020, this is what we are. Yeah, please. Next question.
Thank you so much. The second question was Because in Mahabharata has been written by Rishi Ved Vyasa, and with the help of Lord Ganesha, it is mentioned over there. And going through Ramayana, there also there is mention of Lord Ganesha. So are these two personalities different, or are these the same ones? Because they appear to happen between 6,000 years apart, if we go by the explanation by Shri Nilesh Oak.
Ah, yeah, so I will actually have another talk which can answer it clearly. So I will tell you the nutshell of it. So all the text, Ramayana and Mahabharata, based on the internal evidence itself, it has evolved. Means you can see in Mahabharata, Vyasa mentioning about the work called Jaya. Vaishampayana is calling the work called Jaya. That was the original name, and in that Jaya work, the Vyasa is mentioning about the Kurukshetra war, starting with Bhishma as a command, after that Drona, and then Karna, and then finally Shalya and Ashwatthama. So this was the content of Jaya. And after that, Vaishampayana's is a disciple of Vyas. He talked about this. See, that is what the Janamejaya discussion with Janamejaya is about. Like, I know about the work of Vyas, and then he talks about this, and he talks about Vyasa himself in that and his lifetime. So typically, if Vyasa has authored it, he will not talk about the lifetime of Vyasa himself. So Vyasa's work is Jaya, and after that Vaishampayana has authored it. So he has a certain way of presenting the work of Jaya. So in that he talk about entire life history of Vyasa's mother, Parashara, all people, and life history of the Pandavas and the Kauravas who are taking place in the war. War is mentioned in the Jaya. So what happened to what is happened to the people want to know why about the heroes. So then all the history of Yudhishthir father, Pandu's father, Vichitravirya for the Shantanu. All these people were discussed. So it is the narration of Vaishampayana, and then the Vaishampayana's narrative again told by Ugrasavaswami to Shaunaka after a gap of so many, because in that it is saying that Janamajaya's son, I have mentioned in that king list, Janamaya has got a son called Shatanika, and his son Ashwamedha Datta. Everybody is mentioned. So after 2 generations after Janamejaya, the discussion happens between Sauti and Shaunaka. So in that discussion, a lot of new information is introduced, and Ganesha is one of them. The reason is Ganesha is not mentioned. If Ganesha is actually mentioned similar to Arjuna or Krishna, then so many references will be found. It is just at the top of Mahabharata, some few verses about Ganesha. So it has actually evolved like that. Similarly, is similar mentions in Ramayana also is there. So this is like you have got a sweet. It is covered in a box. That box is covered in another box, and for presentation purpose, that second box is covered in another third box. That is how it is presented. So this kind of presentations, and because of that, the two Ramayana as well as Mahabharata, there is a kind of wrappings over one over the other, like layers on over the other, like that. So a lot of new characters coming into the Mahabharata, and the way it is presented, all these things are coming into the story. So when you people date use Mahabharata for dating something or do some historical analysis, they will remove those verses. These verses will be removed. Otherwise, your date will go wrong. That is a problem.
Yeah, there are 2 questions actually. Regarding horses, I read somewhere that there were horses with 13 ribs and 11 ribs. The 11 ribs were from indigenous horses, Desi breeds, and the 13 ribs were from the Arabia and other things. Is it true?
Yeah, actually, I also have heard about it. But how do we corroborate it with the dates? Because the question is about domestication, etc. So the horse rib definitely doesn't have much impact onto whatever we are talking about it. Because our habitable zone of evolution in which the points are domestication and carts, that is the vehicles driven by animals, and then solid wheel chariots and spooked wheel chariot, which can be driven faster because the horse travel very fast. And in order to make the chariot light, it has to become spooked wheel. Otherwise, solid wheels, it's heavy. When the horse runs, all the wheels will go to 4 different directions because it cannot withstand that heaviness of the wheel itself. So these are the problems that we have addressed. Definitely, it will have a significance in some other part, but the different trips, otherwise it doesn't have an impact. And if you are asking question about because there is a kind of confusion created by the Western side people that there are no horses in India, that is another thing. So whenever anybody finds some horse in India, they will say that horse is not real horse, that is ass. So that is there, but we are not into that area because I am completely focused on the out of India theory. So I'm not believing all this nonsense about no horse found in India, etc. This is, and to answer those kind of confusions, people will start bringing up this kind of concepts like Indian horse is different. So that is why that is not required. At least for me, I am fully convinced about a horse presence in India, even in the Harappan, Indus Valley civilization, etc. So if you ask, for example, 3000 BC dates of Manish, Achar, and Vedavir, horses were there at that time. There is no doubt about it.
Ji, Namaskar, Ji. We recently interacted on your presentation in IIR and earlier in Draupadi Trust Maharaj, if you remember me.
Okay, yes. Yes.
There were 2 questions which I just would like to draw your attention. One is what you stated, Potter's Wheel 3500 BCE. In the Indus-Saraswati region, excavation done in Mehergarh in late 1718, Potter's Wheel is 6000 BC and beyond. Please check that. One other point is the slide which is being shown, chariot's evolution possible only after 1800 BCE. About this, I would like to draw to Dr. B.B. Lal's 2002 presentation and booklet brought out by NCERT, Why Perpetuate Myth, and I have posted those links of that on the blog, and one YouTube presentation by B.B. Lal about these chariots being present and being in Harappan at 3000 BCE. So this question is only possible after 1800. He is presenting it from archaeological point of view. This is my second observation and a poser. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, there are 2 types of chariots. What is the solid wheel chariot? That is actually there in 3500 BC, 3200 BC also we have got archaeological records. But we didn't get anything which is spooked wheel. And again, as I said, this is a area of debate in the archaeology. We submit something with the spooked wheel and finally they say there is no spook. Even for the recent excavation in Sinoli that happened, we have our side archaeologists, actually B.B. Lal's disciples, actually they are all close to me, K.N. Dikshit and other people. They have brought this evidence of a spooked wheel chariot, and anyway that is dated around 2000 BC to 1008 BC by our own people. But some of this western side people are not ready to accept it as a spooked wheel chariot. So definitely I am from the side of our side and trying to bring it in our acceptance. And then one big problem is that in India you don't have the correct means up to standard lab where you can actually authenticate ourselves, and that kind of dependency should be solved maybe in the couple of years. That with our current government they should actually resolve these problems, and all the dependency of validation from the western laboratories should be ending. And even I had a discussion about this in various archaeology forums, etc. So your point is right. We have got chariot at least. I agree. There is that solid wheel chariots been accepted. Actually, the dates what I am given is actually accepted by the opposing camp also. That's what I am actually putting the dates. But otherwise, our side acceptance, you have little more flexible dates are there. For example, this particular Sinoli chariot, there are our own archaeologists are ready to give a date of 2200 BC to that. Then you got a spooked wheel chariot at 2200 BC, but it is currently in the process of evaluation and confirmation by everybody, like both our camp and opposite camp. That is the difference. Same with the potter's wheel. One of the accepted dates for it is 3500 BC, but this right now I can say that this can be like it can be jumped to the next millennium just by one excavation itself. It is possible. So none of these dates are actually carved on stone. It will keep on changing, and the tendency is going upward, like to the higher, like for some 100 or 200 or 500 years into the past. I agree about that. Yeah.
You have this timeline with so many researchers. Just first of all, tell me how many of these are actually practicing archaeologists or geologists, for that matter. That one. Yeah. I mean, so, you have so many names. How many of these are actually practicing archaeologists or geologists?
Yeah, I agree. I got that point. So currently, if in this entire dots you are seeing, B.B. Lal is an archaeologist par excellence. Every other people are archaeoastronomers. So that is one point. But second point of it, because I understand your point of view, is that the people who are dating the Mahabharata, based on literary evidences, like reading Mahabharata and Ramayana, they are, by profession, they are not archaeologists or geologists, because maybe mostly their focus is on literature. So there is a symbiotic dependence between the archaeologist and the geologist. So not being an archaeologist is not a black mark on them. But of course, the other side of what you said, they have to corroborate their dates with archaeology, or maybe having a conversation with archaeologists, or have an explanation why the dates are not aligning with archaeology. This should be there. But there is no need that they should be archaeologists or geologists. Typically, the entire work of archaeoastronomy is like software knowledge, because the tools are software. All this planetarium tool, all the tools of Panchanga, Jagannatha Hora, all these are software tools. So their expertise is looking at the software tool. Then some of them are practicing like Jyotishis, like Manish Pandit is a Jyotishi. Some of them like Ashok Bhatnagar, he is an astronomer. He is actually a very senior member in the government service, and professionally an astronomer. And many others are mathematicians, and many of them are in the IT field. So that is the profile, the typical profile that the people who are doing this research.
Jiji, what I was exactly pointing out, and you brought out the Sinoli chariots which are going beyond 2000 BCE. Those are not solid wheel, those are the spoke wheel. And I have posted two links. One is the B.B. Lal's old presentation about spoke wheel. Spoke wheel. Latest one video also posted a link very clearly about the presence of the spoke wheel chariot, and its representation is shown on these small toys, which are spoke wheels and marked as spoke wheel. He has specifically detailed over last 10 years many presentations, and his works are very precisely said it's a spoke wheel, not the That was my spoke wheel.
I actually am accepting that point. So I am actually talking about Sinoli chariot as a spoke wheel only. And the kind of dates that they are now bringing up is 2200. That's what I said. Spoke wheel chariot itself. But the dates are actually 2200. And generally chariot, that is what I am saying. Solid wheel general chariots, they are actually available from 3200 BC onwards. 3500 BC also they are available. The same time when the bullock carts are there, within 200 years, you have got this solid wheel chariot. So definitely they are there. That's what I'm saying. So I think that distinction you need. Sinoli chariot, I am arguing sense that I am discussing in the forums from the point of view that it is a spoked wheel chariot. That's what I'm saying. And the date I am given 2200 BC. I mean here I am in the PPT I am putting 2000 BC. Now they are revising it to 2200 BC. The people who have excavated it. That is what I have said. And I am saying spooked wheel. That is the Sinoli, the spooked wheel I am saying, not solid wheel.
So the second part of the question was, I mean, it was actually a leading question. The point is, I am also not an archaeologist or even a historian or anything like that. I'm not prejudiced against those people either. The point is that whatever excavation B.B. Lal had done in the 50s, 1951 to 52, I would like to know if that has been followed up, expanded, corrected, because, you know, if we are still stuck with B.B. Lal's archaeological evidence, excellent though it might be, I mean, from a few tilas, I mean, you have to add to it and further refine it. That is how science works, as you said. Who has done that? That is what I would like to know. If we are processing, you know, if the hardware is from B.B. Lal and everybody uses their own software, it is going to be garbage in, garbage out. Okay. So that is the problem.
Yes. So B.B. Lal's date, it needs another talk in itself. But it is better to like B.B. Lal himself tell that. He has done a lot of meticulous study because in that genealogy there is a king who was migrated from the Hastinapur to Kaushambi. Let me get that. There is an 8th king, Nichakra. The Nichakra was ruling in Hastinapur, and then there was a flood in like the Ganga river changed the course and overflow the city itself. And because of that, they have to leave, and they went to Kaushambi, that Vatsa kingdom near Kashi. So B.B. Lal has corroborated that flood with his archaeological excavation, and then come up with this date that he has put in the 836 BC. So there is a lot of effort gone in. And to answer your question, B.B. Lal's disciples, so means the people who subsequently taken the responsibility of the ASI. So there is B.R. Mani and K.N. Dikshit. They have actually expanded that painted graveware, the boundary. The painted graveware boundary, when B.B. Lal was excavating, it was around 900 BC, but it has now moved to 1200 BC. And I think recently they are expanding it even further up to 2000 BC also. So what it means is that everything that B.B. Lal says, it can actually go up based on his own principles. And regarding the flood itself, there was multiple floods. That's what they're saying, the multiple floods. So maybe it is one of the youngest flood. The corroboration has happened. There can be even older floods also there, and then that migration may be that. So there is a lot of you can say revision into that. What it means is that if you look at it, the archaeoastronomy dates are actually spreading. This Dieter-Koch, this is the last one, Dieter-Koch. It is coming to 1200 BC. In the same time, this whatever started by B.B. Lal, expanded by his own descendants, is in the same right. So you have some kind of an archaeology and archaeoastronomy conformance between 1000 BC to 2000 BC period. That has already arrived. That is what I said, that a lot of things have, a lot of water has flown after Balagangadhara Tilaka's studying Mahabharata, etc. So a lot of things have changed, like Vivekananda was there. So they were all interested in the same problem, but there was no way we can actually solve at that time. In 2020, we have more information, and we are at the cusp of the period where you can actually solve the Mahabharata Kurukshetra war date problem with agreement to both the archaeologists and the archaeoastronomers and other disciplines. That has arrived.
Hi Ravi, thank you so much for the session. So my first question is what about the adulteration in these available dates, especially the archaeology? Like we know the state of the ASI that works. In fact, in one of the session by Raj Vedam sir, so like he mentioned about covering up the sites in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So this is my first question. And second quick question is like, like from where to get the Buddha timeline or genealogy, like which book or Quran it mentions?
Okay.
So this is my
Yeah. So yes, there was a lot of complaint about archaeology, but primarily, and even I actually have. So I have friends both in archaeology and also in the archaeoastronomy. So many of these names you are seeing, I have direct email correspondence. So the problem is that there was a lot of government policies because of which they are forced to do a lot of things and all. There was no direction for the last 70 years. It was completely directionless. So they have made a lot of damage. Like for example, some temples they polish the carving. So in the name of renovation, they polish the carvings of the temples and then it becomes flat. All the delicate, intricate things are gone. But these have happened. This is another area where some of my colleagues like Meera Mishra has talked about it. I think Srijan talk was there for that. Sangam talk was there for that also. This has happened. But what I'm saying is, this is happening in one area. But you cannot, like for example, somebody like Bibi Lal, they are incorruptible. And then K.N. Dikshit, who was recently excavated. The Bibi Lal has excavated Hastinapur and Kaushambi, Sringiverapuram and Chitrakoot, Ayodhya and this other places, Indraprastha. And his disciple K.N. Dikshit, Ahichatra and then Kamble. So they have similar to the excavation of the Troy for the Greek Itihasa, the Greek epics, they have done the equivalent of that. So we have to have utmost respect to them. The problem is that some of these corruptions that in the management of temples, etc., that is not happened in this particular aspect, like archaeology and excavations. They have not done anything which is like indicating of any corruption or anything. Even recently, Sangam Talk has hosted Nalini Rao, who is the daughter of S.R. Rao. He has very faithfully have given the dates for Dwaraka, 1500 BC and pottery at 3500 BC. And Nalini Rao is sticking to that and then expanding that information. I don't think they are anyway corruptible. And second is some of these things like horse domestication. This is not entirely in the hands of ASI. It involves different archaeology departments in other countries, like all the European countries, Central Asian countries, their own archaeology department. After excavations, they are bringing up the dates. The only thing is these dates will keep on changing. So that you cannot see. You can accuse or blame the archaeology department for not maintaining a temple, for example. That has happened in South India, some places, but not for excavating and finding, expanding the dates. Because this is a very intensive process, like digging the entire area. And what happened is one reason, actually possible reason, is because entire northern belt is completely populated. Delhi region, highly populated. You will not get permission for excavation. And some places like Purana Khila, there was some political problem was there. I think in the last 10 years it is eliminated. So they can now freely excavate and go deeper. That is possible. But fund is there. And I think this current government should not hesitate in providing the funds, because it's a huge cost intensive activity. And then it is the effort that is to be committed. There is a big generation of people in the archaeology, youngsters. They are very much interested and not in the shackles of the previous governments. And so they are enthusiastically working and expanding, and you're getting results. That's what I'm saying. Like in the recent 10 years, Birana, they have excavated 7000 BC. So that everything that your Rigveda, all this antiquity of the Rigveda, all the references of astronomy observations mentioned in Rigveda, which is astronomically dated to 6000 BC, etc., is validated, because you have got a 7000 BC archaeology site, Birana, and Rakigari, that is, they are beautifully excavated. So certain areas, it is like a mixed bag. Certain areas, they are doing some damage, especially the management of temples, etc. But in other areas, they are working very well. Did I miss any question answer?
Yeah, that is fine, because the current issue in Ramayodhya, like there is new issue brewing up, like people are claiming it is a Buddhist site. So anyways, like it's okay, like I got this answer. My second question was about the lineage of Buddha.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, please, yeah, continue.
And apart from this, maybe Rahul can comment in the end about the yesterday's session, which was like the affinities between Vedic and Baltic cultures.
Okay, about the lineage, this Buddha Nirvana, you can refer to Vedavir Arya's book, Chronology of India. So that is actually demolishing a lot of this genealogical bottlenecks that I have explained in this slide. He is able to expand the genealogy, that is primarily the Buddha's date, and because of that Mahapadmananda's date. For you have seen in my slide, Mahapadmananda is the street anchor. So that has been shifted. I mean, based on his books, 2 books, that is Chronology of India, Volume 1 and 2. Primarily, I will refer to the volume which is talking about the 3 dating problems in the current chronology. One is Buddha Nirvana. That date has to move 1,300 years into the past. And then another is Shaka and Shakanta era difference. That is another thing. And then you have this Christian era itself, it can be pushed back some 500 years into the past. Whatever Christian era itself is wrong. These 3 important theses are found in his books. You can read, and then your genealogy part at least is solved or is corrected because of that, especially subject to the acceptance by all the research community. So that is one good book, Vedavir Arya's chronology revision books.
Jijit, my question is, you show in that slide where you showed why difference of opinion will come, how each person approaches differently. The first box seemed to be a big culprit there. It will play. I think it will play a very big role on which literary shlokas in the literary part, which shlokas will be considered. And interpretation, also the second box that you had, can we, I mean, just a suggestion, small suggestion, it will help us if that those 2 boxes also are resolved. If you have more resolution between these various claimants that you list, who falls where, how is there a interpretation difference? Are they rejecting quite a few conflicting evidences internally? Those kind of things will be useful, I thought. That's all.
Yeah, I fully agree. And that is where the conference comes in. We try to resolve it through email, but it is a very slow pace motion. And in email, people will discuss different other topics, and then that focus is not there. So if there is a conference, definitely this can be addressed. Even all the 3 you can address actually. The literary analysis and the interpretation, primarily you can analyze it, and the software also, the tools they are using, you can actually streamline that.
Namaste, Prasad from Toronto. Great talk, Jijit ji. Good conversation. So I've been interested in topic for years. So one of the points I want to bring out is the sheet anchor. Instead of Nanda, I would present it as Chandragupta Maurya's identification with as a contemporary of Alexander. That was the sheet anchor introduced by William Jones in end of 17th century. And the 1300 years you talk about is actually starting from there. So 325 BC is when we know that Alexander came and all that. And traditionally, we have been taught that it was Chandragupta Maurya who existed that time, but in fact, it was Chandragupta Gupta, the Sandracotus of the Greeks. So that drives everything by 1300 years. And that also, that's when the Buddha dates goes back from 500 to 1800 BC. And in fact, Shankaracharya, where Adi Shankaracharya I'm talking about, his date is 788 AD, according to current dates. But that also drives back by 1300 years, which goes to 500 BC, really. So that's actually, sheet anchor has to be challenged. And there is a lot of material actually. People have studied and presented, but again, because of political leaning, it has been set back, that date. So that is actually a thing which has to be identified and clarified and insisted that that's the date. So that will affect your Puranic chronology as well, and the Mahabharata timeline eventually.
Yeah, actually, you are talking about whatever sheet anchor I have mentioned about Mahapadmananda. It is actually a branch of the actual sheet anchor. So the actual sheet anchor, like you mentioned, it has got a lot of roots like the Alexander and Chandragupta Maurya. So these are all connected. But currently, what I am showing in my slide is the link. So the link is Mahapadmananda, because in Puranas you have only got Mahapadmananda and this Parishit direct reference. Like this is the total duration in years. So because of that, it's like a tree. Like for example, if there is a tree and one of the branch is growing and it's coming to our Mahabharata studies, that is what I have focused. But actually, if you look at it, like if you read the Vedavyas, Aryas, the revision of the chronology, everything is mentioned. About Alexander and the Maurya, and the wrongly identified as the Chandragupta of Ujjain instead of the original Maurya. So this is actually mentioned in that chronology book. So actually, if you read that, then you will get the entire thing. For me, I need to take the entire sheet anchor. One branch I need to take, which is connecting with the whatever information is there in the Puranas. So it is the same sheet anchor, not a different one. It is the same sheet anchor. It's all connected, Maurya and then Alexander and Buddha, and then because of that Mahapadmananda, everything, it's the same sheet anchor I'm talking about, not a different one.